Will journalism get his revenge on sovereignty in the Belmont Stakes? Let's discuss. Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to a Belmont Stakes Contender Spotlight Series. This one is on your Preakness winner and your Kentucky Derby runner-up journalism. Now, before we get to this very impressive runner for trainer Michael McCarthy, I want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, and so much more. We have you covered for the Belmont Stakes, Saratoga, Keeneland in the fall, the Breeders' Cup, and beyond. So make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. Additionally, I want to remind everyone that we have a great promotion on NYRA Bets. If you have yet to sign up and play on NYRA Bets, this is the best time to do it. If you use the code Belmont25, you get up to a $200 deposit match bonus and a free $25 bet added to your account. Can't beat that. So use the promo code Belmont25. All right, well, listen, let's talk about journalism. This is an incredibly impressive horse that has been on our radar for months. We have talked about him a lot leading up to the Kentucky Derby and obviously then leading up to the Preakness. And now he's going to be competing in the third leg of racing's Triple Crown. And he is the only horse to compete in all three legs of the Triple Crown series this year. We'll talk about whether or not that's a disadvantage potentially for him here in the Belmont Stakes. Now, something that's important to remember, because the Belmont Stakes is at Saratoga, the distance is 1.25 miles, not the traditional Test of Champions 1.5 miles, as it will be again when we reopen the Belmont Stakes down in Elmont once the new Belmont Park is reconstructed. But the 1.25 miles, I do think changes the dynamics a little bit. I think it's one thing to do the 3 races in 5 weeks, and the last one is the longest, going 1.5 miles. Being 1.25 miles, I think is maybe not quite as strenuous on a horse. Doing 3 races in 5 weeks, obviously, is still something that is worth mentioning. And trainer Michael McCarthy talked about doing 3 races in a short period of time for journalism and pointed out that he ran 3 races in 7 weeks when he was a 2-year-old. So this is a horse that does have the capability of running pretty regularly and running at a high level when he runs it regularly. Now, those races were against main special weight competition, the Los Al Futurity, not quite the same as what he's going to be facing in the Belmont Stakes, but he is an incredibly impressive runner. And so let's dive into his details a little bit more in this Spotlight series. Like I said, trained by Michael McCarthy, who has done, I think, an impeccable job making sure this horse is in tremendous condition. When you saw him leading up to the Kentucky Derby, he looked great. When you saw him run back in 2 weeks rest leading up to the Preakness, he looked great. And when he shipped to Saratoga a few days after the Preakness, he already looked great. So he is obviously doing a tremendous job keeping this horse healthy, keeping this horse active, engaged, coat shiny, muscles are rippling. He looks good. He keeps adding weight, it looks like, between these races, which is always a huge positive for these types of horses. Your jockey is Umberto Rispoli. I have not been the biggest fan of some of his rides recently. I think he's gotten journalism into unnecessary trouble 2 of the last 3 times out, obviously very infamously in the Preakness. But I think if you go back 3 races to that Santa Anita Derby, it's a 5-horse field, and he managed to find the one horse that was backing up to run behind going around the turn and really spotted a horse like Baeza 5 or 6 lengths. And really, like I said, the horse kind of bailed him out in a lot of ways, in my opinion, in that race. But nevertheless, Rispoli is remaining on the mount and obviously has a connection to the horse, loves the horse a great deal. You can tell just the connection that they have. So, they are going to continue to ride together. The pedigree, as we've talked about many times, is spectacular. It's one of the best pedigrees of any of the horses in this 3-year-old crop. And I would argue maybe even a more foolproof pedigree than even Sovereignty, who I think is a phenomenally bred horse. But you still have the Into Mischief up top. You have the Bernardini underneath. For Sovereignty, I just love Curlin. I love Curlin as a sire. He's a great distance sire. And then you have Uncle Mo as a broodmare sire underneath, which is just a tremendous combination of stamina, speed, distance, and Mopetism. The dam was a grade 2 winner herself. So you're looking at a lot of class in that pedigree. And this was a horse that went for a big sale price, over $800,000 as a yearling, and looked like a grown man in that yearling sale. Really, really impressive. The notable efforts, you guys know him already because of that win in the Preakness. Just an absolutely jaw-dropping effort in which he is sandwiched between horses and manages to come out of that potentially dangerous situation at the top of the stretch and not only continue running, but track down Gosker, who was completely loose on the lead at that point. And at no point did I think he was going to get there until he got there. And really, really impressive closing kick. And you saw the difference between him and a horse like Sandman, who was closing in the middle of the stretch in that Preakness Stakes. And Sandman looked like he was full of run, too, coming down the middle. And Journalism just kicked into a whole nother gear and just pulled away from Sandman and was able to track down Gosker very impressively. But obviously, before those Triple Crown races, he was, he kind of swept through the California circuit. He won the Los Al Futurity. He won the San Felipe. He won the Santa Anita Derby. He beat all the best horses out in the West Coast. So there's really nobody regionally who is his equal. And the only horse who has proven to be his equal and maybe better is Sovereignty. And so this is going to be the showdown between these two horses. Now, when you look at Journalism, I think, and look at those running lines, it's a little bit interesting because he is a horse that if you look at that Los Al Futurity, I think that's the trip he potentially sits here in the Belmont Stakes. Because if you look at most of his other races, he's facing very short fields, or he's sitting more mid-pack. And that's something that you start to see when you look at those maiden special weight races, when you look at the Kentucky Derby, when you look at the Preakness. He's a horse that is sitting mid-pack, and that is something McCarthy, I think, wants to change. He talked before the Derby, he talked before the Preakness, that this horse can lay close to the lead. And he does have good early speed. That California speed, listen, a horse that closes in California is probably a mid-pack runner in the East Coast. A horse that is a mid-pack runner in the California is probably a tracker stalker on the East Coast. Speed just is upgraded all the time. And if a horse is speed on the West Coast, he's definitely speed on the East Coast. And so you see that speed kind of have to be translated a little bit when they come from one coast to the other. And so Journalism, I think, had a reputation of being this horse that really comes from off the pace, but it was because he was facing really short fields and he was largely running against horses in California that were genuinely milers in a lot of instances and maybe even sprinters. So these were horses that had outstanding early speed, but not great stamina. So they'd go out there up front and he would have, just by the natural turn of foot that these horses had in early acceleration, he would be sitting fourth or fifth in a 5-horse field. And so it looked like, well, he's sitting last. He's not going to sit last in the Preakness or in the Belmont. Especially when you look at the way this field is composed right now, where you have a horse like Rodriguez, who's the only major speed presence in the race. You have a horse like Baeza, who he's run against out in California, who has good tactical speed, but is not a horse that goes to the lead. And you have a horse like then Hill Road and Sovereignty and Heart of Honor, all horses that come from well off the pace and have nowhere near the early acceleration that Journalism does. So I expect him to sit that very similar trip he did in the Los Al Futurity, sitting second or third early on in the race and really keeping Rodriguez in his sights, because the last thing you want is a Bob Baffert horse jockeyed by Mike Smith alone on the lead in a big race. They don't call him Big Money Mike for nothing. And so this is going to be the test of how close do you want to sit to Rodriguez, and how strung out does this field get? How compact is this field? But I think he sits no worse than third in this race, stays within a length or two of the pace, and then is able to make his move. He's got outstanding stamina, and he's got outstanding endurance. The question is, can he do it now? 3 races in 5 weeks. That is the question. If you look at the Beyer speed figures, they're declining. But there's a huge asterisk next to that Preakness, because the Preakness was such an unusual race from the standpoint of the trouble he fit in, the way he closed. You look at some of the metrics of stride length. You look at some of the metrics of how he ran that last 16th of a mile, even that last 1/8 of a mile in the Preakness. It was surreal. Now, on one hand, you could say maybe he emptied the tank to get that win in the Preakness. Now he's wheeling back on 3 weeks rest after running in the Kentucky Derby and running a huge second place effort there. Maybe his numbers are declining. Maybe the Preakness took a lot out of him, but he's a horse that really has never done anything wrong. And it's hard to really discount his ability, and it's hard to discount his talent. The question is, at what price do you want to take a horse like Journalism when he's facing a horse like Sovereignty, when he's facing a horse that's alone in the lead like Rodriguez? Those are questions we have to answer as bettors. What price are you comfortable taking with these types of a horse? I listen, until I see him turn in a dud, I just refuse to believe that he will. He's a horse that seems incapable of running a bad race, and I think just has significant class advantage over most of the field, with the exception of Sovereignty. I really do think it is a top two type of a race. And it just matters, do you want 1A or 1B? And which horse is going to provide you maybe better value, and which horse is going to provide you better value relative to what your opinion is on their chances of winning this race. So journalism is going to sit, I think, the right type of trip. He's going to stay close to Sovereignty, or he's going to stay close to Rodriguez, I should say. Sovereignty, I think, is going to have to, figure out where does he want to sit. That's a horse that doesn't need pace, but nor does journalism. The question is, how much do you want to spot one of those horses, and how much do you want to spot the leaders if you're a horse like journalism, if you're a horse like Sovereignty? You want to keep those horses in your sights. For journalism, you want to keep Rodriguez in your sights. You want to keep Baeza in your sights. You don't want to get too far behind them. You don't want that field to get strung out. If you're Sovereignty, you certainly don't want the field to get strung out. You might not need pace, but you don't want to give journalism a 6-length advantage over you all of a sudden if you're sitting all the way at the back of the field. So these are the sorts of tactical decisions that Umberto Rispoli, Junior Alvarado are going to have to make on the top two horses. But like I said, there's very little to poke holes in terms of journalism's resume. Maybe you look at the Beyer speed figures and you go, well, they're going down. But again, that 98 in the Preakness just comes with a huge asterisk next to it because of the trouble he faced at the top of the stretch and how he was then able to overcome it. That said, you don't want to be fooled by a visually impressive race. And that is something that I will kind of end with, which is I think sometimes we do get a little too attracted to a visually impressive race. And I think of a horse like Tapit Trice when he won the Tampa Bay Derby, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back, and he kind of stumbled out of the gate and spotted the field 15, 20 lengths. I mean, I think legitimately 12 to 15 lengths. And then he made this huge move, swept around and passed everybody and won the Tampa Bay Derby. And it was visually one of the most impressive races you'll see for a young 3-year-old on a Kentucky Derby prep race. Practically, the race came back slow, though. I think he earned like an 83 Beyer speed figure, an 88 or something like that. It wasn't a big number. And so you do need to make that distinction between a visually impressive effort and a genuinely impressive effort in terms of journalism. But what did it take out of him? And is he able to do it 3 times in 5 weeks when nobody else in the field is doing that? Everybody else in the field is coming in on a normal running cycle, coming in fresh and feeling good. So that is the question that you have to answer with journalism. But there is no question over his talent or over his ability. And like I said, he has done very little wrong to this point in his career to make you think he's not going to run a good race. Now, one of the final things I will say is, interestingly enough, favorites over the last 12 years have done very, very well at the Belmont Stakes. They've won 5 of the times. They've finished in the top 3, 10 of the 12 times. That said, second and third choices, and journalism will probably be a second choice to Sovereignty. Again, could it be 1A, 1B sort of a thing? Absolutely. But if he's a second choice, historically, second choices have not run particularly well. They've only won twice, and I think they've only hit the board 5 times out of the last 12 years. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, could the wear and tear of this long campaign finally catch up with a horse like journalism when he's facing horses that are going to be fresh off the bench? All right. Well, friends, I'm going to stop it there. Remind you to press that like and subscribe button. And remember to use Belmont25 as your promo code to sign up on NYRA Bets. My name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and profitable day at the races. And reminding you, friends, it's now post time.